All right. Good morning, everybody. It's 10:10 a.m. on Tuesday, May 13th, 2025. We are calling the regularly scheduled Development Review Committee meeting to order. We're going to start with a staff roll call. And my name is Andrew Penny, Senior Planner for Development Services.
Christopher Gratz, Senior Planner Development Services. Richard Nixon, Director, Building Code Services.
David Tolsis, City Attorney.
Liz Tashero, Development Services Director.
Gio Batista.
Gio Batista, Public Works Director.
Al Bennett, Margate Police Department Major.
Paula Fonseca, Department of Environmental and Engineering Services.
David Scholl, Fire Marshal.
All right, thank you. We've got 3 applications submitted for one project. So if it's all right with the committee and the applicant, we're just going to call them all together. That's DRC numbers 24-004-0067, which is consideration of a development agreement for the redevelopment of Carolina Club Golf Course. We've also got DRC number 24-004-00057, consideration of a land use plan amendment for the redevelopment of Carolina Golf Course. And DRC number 24-004-00056, consideration of a rezoning for the development of Carolina Club Golf Course located at 3011 Rock Island Road. The current zoning designation is S2 Open Space District. And the petitioner is Matthew Scott for Greenspoon Martyr, agent for Rosemergy Acquisitions. Does the committee have any additional comments or corrections to the comments that were posted online? Would the applicant like to come forward and address any of the comments?
Yes, good morning. My name is Matthew Scott. I'm a zoning attorney at Greenspoon Martyr, an address of 200 East Barrett Boulevard, here on behalf of the applicant. I'm joined as well by Rick Stefano from Rosemergy Acquisitions, and then our traffic engineers from Kimley Horn. Let me give sort of a summary of the project for context. We have submitted a land use plan amendment, a rezoning application, and development agreement application for the redevelopment of the Carolina Golf Course. The approach that we've taken is we wanted to have this first DRC meeting, which we've been working on with your staff for over a year, to kind of ferret out the key issues and major hurdles for the project. Because frequently what happens is during this DRC, the plans can change substantially. And so we're working through that with your staff. These comments are really helpful and we're reviewing them in depth. And then our plan going forward is that we'll then start meeting with neighbors and the local associations. Again, we wanted to wait to do that because we were fearful that the plans might change. And so if we met with them too early, there'd be an issue of, providing accurate information. So we're going to be working through these DRC comments and then meeting with the neighbors as we sort of work our way towards the public hearings on this. But the proposed project is to redevelop the golf course with a commercial pod that'll have neighborhood serving uses, restaurants, other retail options. And then there'll be another pod that will have townhomes. One more pod that'll have multifamily, which is apartments, and then over 65 acres. So over half the project will be dedicated to lakes and open space and greenways, walking trails, things of that nature. And so with that being said, let me go through some of the questions that we identified. So traffic was a major point of discussion. We realized how important that is for this project. And so we had a few questions. We also were hoping with this meeting that we could get an agreement with staff to engage the city's consultant, whatever is required for that, so that they can get going on their review, whether they want to do a study as well. We want to get that going as fast as possible because we realize how important that is. And so we're hopeful that that can be something that we figure out the mechanics of soon. But Chris, we'll start with the LUPA. If there's any questions or clarifications you have.
Thank you. And Just for the record, Chris Hagan with Kimley Horn Associates. My address is 477 South Rosemary Avenue, Suite 215 in West Palm Beach. I'm a transportation engineer, so working on behalf of the applicant on this project. We had a couple of comments related to the land use plan amendment, and then a couple related to the zoning application. The rest of them, I think, were relatively specific technical comments that we can easily work through, things that related to distribution percentages and growth rate calculations and everything, again, which are much deeper in the weeds. But if it's okay to meet with your transportation consultant, then we can work through a lot of those items. Looking at the land use plan amendment, first of all, it's reference number 49 was a comment that we did want to discuss a little further because, first of all, when we do a land use plan amendment application, we are typically comparing the maximum theoretical development intensity of the current land use designation to that of the proposed designation. So we did in this case treat the existing land use designation as a golf course and then compared it to the theoretical trip generation for the proposed use. And so this was saying that because the golf because the golf course is closed, that it wouldn't be considered in the analysis. But again, and when we understand that for the traffic study for the rezoning application, that would be the case if it's not operational. But for the land use amendment, we're comparing categories. So the existing category for the current designation and to the category for the future designation. So typically we compare, again, the trip generation for that category for the existing compared to the category for the proposed. And that's consistent with when this goes to the Broward County Planning Council, that's how they'll evaluate it as just part of their general methodology. So we did want to clarify that still is appropriate for us to take that into account. The other part of this this comment was item C, where it said the residential units are not included in the trip generation. And the reason we didn't do that is because they're already part of the pool. We aren't, that they aren't being sought as part of this application because those units are already in the density pool.
Yeah, so the Carolina dash line area has more residential units existing. And so we're not, as part of the applications, asking for more residential units. Sometimes with land use plan amendments, there is no existing residential density allocated to a site or a project or an area. So in that case, you would be asking for those new units. So this is sort of a very technical, sort of academic land use and zoning type thing, but we wanted to clarify that because it was already accounted for when the dash line area was approved by the city. Right.
Yep. Yeah. And so our understanding was, again, for the land use plan amendment application, it was looking at what was being sought, which was the commercial piece. And so that's what the change is. And so that's what's represented in the analysis. The other item just that we wanted to touch upon was reference number 50, the next one related to the trip distribution documentation. And I think that may be a larger discussion with the city's consultant. There are a couple of different ways that can be documented, whether it's a long-range model run using the Southeast Regional Planning Model, or there are a couple other methodologies that can be done. And so we did want to clarify what sort of documentation is going to be needed, but that may be a separate meeting where where that's clarified. But we do need to understand, this, it was sort of open-ended, so we did want to clarify how that'll be done.
Hi, this is Andrew Penny. Just to jump in, don't mean to cut in front of you, Paul, or anything. We do recognize and acknowledge the units vested on the land use map. However, when it comes back to crediting the golf course, I had an info only comment in there, reference number 62. If you're relying on vested rights of this property, please follow the process described in section 40.343. I think that would be helpful in resolving that issue with the closed course versus whatever credits it had on there.
Yeah, let me jump in if it's okay. We're kind of jumping around, but one of my notes here was to ask about that. So what you're driving at with that comment is if we are claiming there are units available, what you're suggesting is we should get the vested rights determination, which would put that in writing from the city.
I wasn't so much concerned about the units. Those are on the map. I was concerned about the vested rights from the previously developed golf course, whatever square footage in that clubhouse and event center, the trips generated by the club course, that type of thing.
Okay, okay, that makes sense. Because I was confused by the units piece because we asked the city how many units were there and you told us, so it would be kind of like a circular exercise where we say, can you put in writing? And they're like, well, I did already. And then, so, okay, so I get what you're saying. All right, that's helpful.
Paula, did you want to add anything? Introduce yourself.
My name is Paula from Dees. I would like to see if maybe Lisa can answer some of those questions for the two comments that Chris is bringing up.
Sure. Hi, this is Lisa Bernstein. Can you hear me?
Lisa, I'm going to introduce you briefly. This is Lisa Bernstein. She is the consultant and she's helping us with the traffic. Go ahead,
Good morning, everybody. I heard what Chris said, and I'm okay with the fact on the LUPA that there's different rules in the traffic study. So if the city is okay with comparing the existing use to the proposed use in the LUPA, then that's fine with me as well.
We're okay. Yeah. Go ahead, Lisa. We're okay with the comparing just the categories for, that will be for addressing reference comments 49 A, right?
And I have them as, I have mine up. Let me look at numbers for yours.
You have the reference number 49. The existing golf course has been closed since 2018. It is not applicable as an existing use. And I
Right.
think saying that we're just comparing the categories instead of the actual development.
That's fine. That's fine. I don't have a problem with that.
Okay. So that's something that is gonna be reflected, I guess, in the
Yeah, we'll provide responses to the comments and just explain that. And when we get to the rezoning traffic study comments, we understand that that we cannot take credit for the golf course in the rezoning traffic study because it's not reflected in the background traffic count. So we do understand that.
all right. Any other comment, Lisa?
Not on what he has said so far. I'm good.
We covered the vested rights comment. The fire comments are repeats. We're working with fire staff on getting the concurrency study going. And so I think that's going to be part of that analysis. So that's all we have for the land use and zoning. I'm sorry, the land use plan amendment, because we understand most of the comments what you're asking for. So then jumping to the rezoning.
Matt, if I could jump in before we move on from land use. Just recalling what we learned from the NOVA process, Broward County Planning Council has prioritized affordable housing. And although this amendment would not obligate the developer to provide any affordable housing under policy 2.16.2, just wanted to clarify on record, is the developer willing to provide any as part of this project or possibly make a contribution to the Broward County Affordable Housing Fund?
Because it's not a requirement, and because we were under the impression the city didn't want affordable housing, it wasn't something that we've contemplated, so I'll have to get back to you on that. Okay,
I just wanted to ask and clarify for when we go in front of planning council again, that was a big issue.
Yes, we'll be prepared for that. We are a ways away from that, so we will be prepared, but I appreciate you bringing it up.
Thank you.
So then to the rezoning. Go ahead, sure, yeah.
Okay. Again, Chris Hagan with Kimberly Horn and Associates. The first one we wanted to discuss from a traffic perspective was reference number 24. And this was asking about the level of detail in the site plan that's being provided. Typically for the rezoning application, we don't have like a fully fledged site plan to the level of detail that's described here. It talks about pavement markings, like location of loading areas, possible speed humps, that kind of thing. And my understanding is from a process standpoint, again, this application is rezoning. We did have a concept plan that you kind of refer to it generally as a bubble plan, where it showed the location of the pods and the general locations of access to and from the pods. And that at least lets us know where where the access points are going to be, so the traffic will be coming in and out. My understanding is that later each pod will still have to submit an application. And so I think our suggestion is that that with the pod applications, we get into the detail of things like pavement marking and striping, the signage, if there are speed humps or traffic calming, and those kinds of levels of detail, because again, for the rezoning standpoint, a lot of that just isn't known at this stage. Recognizing that the location, at least, where the access points are and everything, that does influence traffic. And we did identify those. There's probably we could provide maybe a little bit greater level of detail than what was currently provided. So, again, there might be a few additional things that we could flesh out. And so we'd be more than happy to work with you to do that. It's just that what's described in this comment, I think is too much detail that just isn't known at this stage, but would be known, pod by pod when each of the pod applications come in separately. So again, just wanted to discuss that as far as the level of detail that can be and can't be provided at this stage.
Yeah, just to piggyback here. So the structure of this project at this stage is that we're doing a land use amendment and a rezoning, and then a development agreement that creates obligations on our part and maximum and minimum levels of development. The idea of this being that because it's such a huge undertaking to change a land use plan and to rezone a site like a golf course, we wanted to do the site plans at a later date because that's a huge undertaking of its own. And so the idea is that if the land use plan amendment and the rezoning and the development agreement are approved by the city and the county, what that creates is it sets the table for us to then do site plan applications for each pod that will only get approved if they meet your code, if we comply with the requirements, if the access is correct, if they individually meet traffic. And so that's a unique feature here that we wanted to chat about, because there is some of the comments relate to saying, hey, we need to provide more details, when the idea of the development agreement is that those details would come at the site plan stage.
Thank you so much, guys, for addressing that comment. That was also a comment that we are looking forward to review in the engineering department, because with the site plan, we're going to get into more detail, concrete evaluation on what is going to be the actual impact of this development relating to traffic and anything that the development is going to be impacting not only the commercial, but also on the residential side. So we need to address something that is concrete to actually provide any recommendations. So during the site plan, we're going to have some evaluation done with more concrete driveways and entrances for this commercial area. And then, what is the commercial actually going to look like? If it's going to be a retail, or if it's going to be something more besides the retail. Then we're going to be evaluating what are going to be the actual impact of this. Without the actual site plan, it's really hard for the city and for the engineer, for your team to assess what is the actual traffic impact. And with the site plan, not only on the traffic aspect, but I think something that we have encountered from this department to evaluate this project on what is going to be the impact on the drainage, for example, since we don't have the actual layout of the development.
Right. So I think what we thought would make sense is to add language into the development agreement that outlines the things we must do during the site plan stage to get any sort of site plan approval, so that there's no uncertainty on the city's part about these things will get addressed, because it's not in any way our expectation to skirt those obligations. It's just we've taken the approach for this project to bifurcate the land use and zoning parts from the site plan exercise. So I think that would help give the city the level of comfort that we're trying to provide, that it will get addressed during the site plan stage of the process.
Right, just I feel like there is a void in the development agreement when we don't really know what is gonna be the traffic impact.
David Tulsa, City Attorney. And we'll work on this to make sure, but I know we do have language in there requiring specific items, including the traffic study, the analysis, what improvements will need to be made as a result of any traffic studies. So, but we'll continue to review, revise, and update the agreement to make sure that staff um, is comfortable with the process that will be in place if these items get approved.
Andrew Penny. I just wanted to clarify and add in that in these types of applications, land use and rezoning, the city has to have a finding that there's adequate public service available for the proposed development in place. System called concurrency, just to make sure the roads are big enough, there's enough drainage, whatnot. And our code directs us when reviewing these is that when you submit the rezoning and whatnot without a site plan, we're instructed to assume the maximum impact permitted under that land use and zoning category. If a site plan is submitted, staff can use that as the basis for reviewing the impact, but without the site plan, it's like worst case scenario on the review. So that may be something we can navigate with a development agreement to figure out exactly what those impacts are, but I just wanted to clarify the policy and code in effect.
We understand, yes.
And to clarify, that's fully understood, and to a certain extent for the traffic study, there are definitely, pieces of information that you absolutely need to know, and we need to know where the access locations are, what kind of configuration they're going to have. Is it full access, or does it only allow right in, right out access, et cetera, et cetera. And so you can't do a traffic study without knowing that. And so the comment isn't that we're not going to provide, or that our kind of response to this comment isn't that we're not going to provide any information. It's just we need to settle on the level of detail of information that is known at this time that we can provide. Because again, some of this talked about locations of speed humps, or pavement markings and actual signage and everything, and some things that are very granular that we just don't know at this stage, but that would be known once the detailed pod plans, or pod by pod plans are created. But we can work, I think, to take the concept plan that was in the appendix and probably refine and add a little bit more detail than what was already provided. It's just we have to find what level of detail we know at this point and can provide versus, again, we don't have detailed engineering drawings of the pod within the pods and everything yet. So the next comment I was going to bring up was, oh, sure, go ahead.
Just one little thing, Chris. So based on this comment, then we're gonna be assuming that after, when we receive the site plan and we actually get a review of each one of the pods and what is gonna be their impact, probably we're gonna have actual comments on what is gonna be the impact on the traffic and drainage and the other elements that these reviews.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Understood. And, just thinking of other projects in some other municipalities, we've structured it in that way in other cases. And so sometimes, for example, on a gated, if these are gated, if you have a guard gate, at the time of the overall master plan or rezoning, you don't know exactly, what the guard gate's going to look like and all that. And so, we show that where the entrance is going to be, but we don't get into that level of detail. And then when we've gone through later with the pod plan, then it gets reviewed to say, okay, well, yes, you need to have 5 vehicles of queuing length before the guard gate. Your plan's only showing 4. Go back and revise that pod plan. So we understand that that some of that back and forth review and comment will be required later when those pods come through. But that kind of level of design, typically, we were expecting to happen at that phase.
Yeah, also, we want based on the traffic evaluation, once we know all those details, what is gonna be the impact on Sample Road and on Rock Island, on all the adjacent intersections, based on the code, whatever we have to review, we also need to know what is gonna be the impact on those roads and what are gonna be the recommendations, that need to be addressed, based on, once we know all the details from the site plan.
Understood. Yep.
Just, Gio Batista, Public Works. Just to add to that, that's a very good point. The concerns that were brought up in internal discussions was this notion that it's not only the site plan, but there might be queuing lanes, storage lanes off-site. That it's just not a matter of saying it's a level of service C without the storage lane, that we might go to, what's the best thing for the community, going to level service B with a storage lane, making a left turn in, for example. So we discussed those and just wanted to point that out to you.
Understood. And I think the goal with this process is to, at the end of the day, figure out, those items, just to know from a, just the macro level, that, the overall this project is going to require, for example, at a driveway to say, okay, yeah, we're going to need to have a right turn deceleration lane. And so identify that, et cetera, down the line. So that's understood. Yep. The next item just to, that we had wanted to address today was, excuse me, the next one, reference number 25. Yeah.
Chris, just to add on to that analysis for the traffic and kind of deferring it to the site plan level is, this is more an informative comment than anything. The applications before us are going to go through a public hearing process. There's another application for a plat required that will go through public hearing process. But the zoning categories selected, those site plans will typically be an administrative review without public hearing. So just to inform our policymakers and whatnot, they may not know the full impact if there is a turn lane required or a queuing lane or whatnot required to the road network when we go in this order.
Well, and I think the point of the rezoning, kind of the full-blown traffic study for the whole project is to identify any of those offsite improvements or anything on the public right of way. So if we do need a right turn deceleration lane, or if there's a left turn lane that needs to be lengthened by 75 feet or whatever the case may be, that would be identified in the overall traffic study, and that informs the conditions of approval that say this left turn lane needs to be extended, just whatever those requirements are, and that becomes the obligation of the project. I think really from a pod by pod perspective, that what really comes out of that more is just what's happening from within the project boundary, within the site boundaries. So the example I gave already was, for example, if it were gated, where, how far in is the guard gate located? Where is that call box located? How much vehicle queuing do you have? So that all really, I think the idea of the rezoning application is it deals with everything, kind of on the external road network. When the pods come in, then it's making sure that everything from the boundary line in functions and flows from a traffic perspective. Again, the guard gate is the easiest one to talk about, but where there might be like visitor parking spaces, making sure that there are enough provided and that they're in the right location, and and that they've got enough back out distance and everything. But again, everything internal to the site boundary that doesn't really affect the public. It affects the operations of the residents within the parcel, the pod itself. If that helps.
Well, I always like to use analogies, right? So when the city, as an example, adopted their activity center land use designation and rezoned the parcels, right? Did you have a site plan for every single site in your activity center? No, right? So the idea of the development agreement is to provide the level of protections in place to ensure we go through the process. And then the site plan is an absolute, clearly established process in your code. And so that's our thinking on how we're doing some of the sequencing there, is that we're going to address those. It's just not we're going to address those in the level of detail the city's requesting, absolutely, including offsite improvements if required. It's just we're not doing that with this phase.
I mean, Matt, your analogy is not apples and apples, because the county views the activities as generally like a traffic reduction, than the typical single use. So, but I get what you're saying about the
Well,
process.
but when the city did the rezoning
Mhm.
to TOCG corridor and gate, did you have a site plan for every single site?
No.
Showing access, showing curb cuts, showing decel lanes? Of course not. Of course not. How could you possibly?
No.
And so we're not exactly, reinventing the wheel here or creating something that's never been done. I just wanted to clarify that.
Gio Batista, Public Works. I appreciate your comment. Just want to make sure that from our perspective, you understand that our commitment is to ensure that you're aware of those things that might be problematic for us so that you can proactively look ahead
Of course.
of what we're trying to do. So, we don't want to impose things that we ought not to impose, but enlighten as far as what kind of situation may not allow a queue of 80 feet. Because if it's required to be a queue of 80 feet or storage of 80 feet, then it's going to impact you in such a way where maybe the development has to be shifted in such a way where it's not economical anymore.
Right.
And I'm just saying this as an example, but I wanted to share that because I don't want that to be missed. Thank you.
Right, and we get that there's risks associated with this approach, for sure. Yeah, we're not unaware of that.
The next item that we are just going to touch on was reference number 25, the next one for traffic. Talked about the methodology provided in Appendix A. We had prepared that methodology over a year ago, I think, based on an initial meeting that we had with the city. And I don't think you had your outside consultant on board yet at that time. So I just wanted to say, and I know, Lisa, that you're on the phone, that we'd like then, since you weren't here, when we first had laid out that methodology, that's something that we can revisit and discuss with you. I mean, I think we're hoping that if there's any change to it, it would be relatively minor tweaks because we did spend some time, I think, kind of defining those parameters, but would be happy to discuss that, with you now that you're on board.
I refer to Lisa. I don't know if Lisa has any comment on that.
That's fine. We can revisit the methodology. I just had a comment because my understanding was that, based on the traffic study submitted for the rezoning, I'm supposed to say that it does not have any impact on the surrounding roadways, but I don't have enough information to make that statement. So I'm not sure how that would proceed with the development order and with respect to that requirement. Can someone answer that, or explain something? Because I can't tell what's happening on the outer roads without knowing the internal movements of the pods.
Well, I think that we can provide, again, more detail for the pods themselves as far as like how many units are in each pod and where their access locations are going to be and the configuration of those access points, so that because I think that informs, again, the actual driveway operations and then the distribution on the external roadway system, which should give us the detail needed to evaluate level service on Sample Road and Rock Island Road, et cetera. What we were referring to earlier is, again, we don't know exactly, for example, where the mailbox, drop off area is going to be that residents would go to pick up and drop off their mail within the site. And, where you'd have speed humps located on the internal road, or if there would be any in there, and that level of detail within the pod isn't needed, or isn't known, but that shouldn't be needed for us to assess impacts on Sample Road, et cetera. Again, it'll be, we can talk with you further about just the level of detail we provide, but we do know, how many units per pod, where we're proposing the access and the configuration of that access. And I think that gets us pretty much there, if not all the way there. And we could, again, discuss any further detail you may need. And as far as the impact goes, then we can assess the level of service and whether improvements are needed, like, turn lane extensions or, right turn decel lanes and that kind of thing from that information.
That would be better because like on the level of service and delay tables, I would like it per movement as well as per approach. So I will be able to see, that's how you would determine your turn lane issues or anything like that. And also you're showing an additional connection to Sample Road, which is a state road. Have you met with the DOT on that?
We have met with FDOT and we can provide the documentation related to our pre-app meeting with them. Yeah.
And did they approve that connection?
That's we have the concept plan, or we have the pre-app letter from FDOT, so we can provide that.
Okay.
And then, there was a, comment 36 related to, trip generation, and really item B, the actual tenants for the retail aren't known at this stage. So, we'll just need to discuss that with you as well too, because, there are, there's several different, ITE categories for retail, based on the total square footage and with and without grocery store, et cetera, et cetera. So understand the comment and we'll just need to work through that. But I did want to just again note that the exact tenants aren't known. It's just known in general that will be commercial, that there would be commercial uses there. So we'll have to just kind of choose again, something that might provide us with the worst case or conservative analysis, and that we understand that.
Okay, that, right, because when it was started, it was like restaurants and things like that. So it just didn't seem like just a large grocery store with a couple of small, retail portions. Because that's not the gist of what I was getting, what's being said. So it sounds like it's going to be more, oriented with retail and restaurants to enhance the area, which is no problem. We just need to clarify that.
Understood. I think, the rest of them were kind of technical comments were, again, related to how peak season correction factors were applied and the overall, the traffic distribution, et cetera. So I think those were relatively straightforward and we don't need to put everybody to sleep here in the room going over those.
And if the city is okay with it, I do not have a problem with talking with you directly. It makes things easy for me as well. But that's their call, but I don't have an issue with it.
Yeah, it's okay. We can probably set up a meeting or something. Yeah. Thanks, Lisa.
You're welcome.
Okay, the only other question I had was about the vested rights, which we discussed. So then we can move to the development agreement. Obviously appreciate the DRC's thoughtful comments and revisions to the development agreement that we had. We're reviewing a lot of it. It's going to take some time to go through those various items. So I don't know if we want to discuss those. Let me see if I had any other questions. No, that's it. Everything else we understand the comments and don't have questions about.
Does the DRC board have anything to add? No? All right, I did just want to bring just a point of information. The adopted level of service for arterials and collectors and Margates is a level of service D, and our local roads adopted level of service C. And in the rezoning narrative, they're kind of citing those 7,100 some odd trips and level of service E and F. So again, get with the traffic consultants together and try to work something out on that development agreement so that we can come to an understanding to move this forward. And for now, on these applications, the DRC acts as a recommending body. We do recommend you resubmit the DRC and try to knock out some of these comments before moving to public hearing. Sorry.
And then Matt, with respect to the development agreement, I know that, staff is continuing to review items along with my office, so we might have some additional comments that aren't necessarily contained in the latest version. So we appreciate your willingness to continue to work.
It's our expectation that there's going to be quite a bit of back and forth on development agreement. So we weren't expecting that that was some sort of final response.
All right. Thank you, David, for joining us. And with that, we're going to close the meeting.
Thanks. Thank you.